I'm an IPF patient, and I'm excited today to have one of my favorite people, I'm going to call him the guy in the white horse. And I'm going to introduce you to Bill Schmidt. And Bill is the president and CEO of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. And Bill's interesting. I look at Bill as kind of a Renaissance guy. He does so many different things along with the organization. He's got 25 years of successful business in healthcare and healthcare advocacy. He's been a leader, a demonstrable leader. He's coming to an organization, the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, that's been left in good hands by his predecessors, Dan Rose, Patty Toomey, Mike Henderson, the former chairman of the board, and then, of course, George Itis, the current chairman of the board. And it's a dynamic organization, but I think what I love about Bill the most, I'm going to give you a quote that I picked up on the internet that he made. It's a great quote. He said, "Working with ambitious patient-led groups to eradicate disease has been my life's work. And you can't say it any better than that." So I'm going to introduce you to Bill, and I'm going to ask Bill a question right off the top. And that question is, Bill, first, welcome, and I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Bill.
But, every week we see 1,000 people diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, 4,000 a month, 48, 50,000 people a year. As that happens, and I look back when I was diagnosed, I'm probably typical of the majority of patients. You go through that kind of shock and awe of that realization of what you've been told, that you have a terminal disease, you're going to die at some point in time, and you just kind of shake your head, and it's confusing, and you have senses of anger and fear and all of that. And here's the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and it is our white horse. So if I'm a newly diagnosed patient, how will and how can the PFF help me?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bill, for this opportunity. And yes, we completely understand that individuals and families receive this diagnosis. And as you said, they're shocked and they're awed. They're scared to death. They perhaps have never heard of pulmonary fibrosis before. So they're bewildered. They want information. And we have a whole panoply of programs available for these folks. We understand that the first step has to be really understanding what is happening to me, what is happening to my loved one. And so we have a range of programs, starting with our patient communications center, where people can call, they can contact us through our website as well, and receive a new patient packet, which contains a lot of information about the disease. They can learn about support groups that exist across the country, and specifically in their particular area. They can sign up for webinars that take place periodically throughout the year. We now also have an app that's in beta version right now that we announced at our summit meeting last November, which allows people to track their symptoms and donate data anonymously if they so choose, as well as access vital information from the PFF, about their disease, and hopefully that will also help them on their journey.
Bill, sometimes I kind of look at and think about the PFF like the old story about the three blind men with an elephant coming up with different parts, and they didn't know what they were. It's kind of the same thing, because you are so many things. Right. As a newly diagnosed patient, I think the literature pack that I've seen from the pulmonary fibrosis is excellent, just excellent. Right. That first need that you mentioned, which is understanding the disease, is important, and you provide that information. Now, everyone isn't quite sure of how to get that kind of information. So from some simple basic steps, like as an example, I look at the helpline you have that's staffed by professionals. People can ask questions and get information. But working through the website sometimes, particularly for some of us, let's say a little gray in the hair folks that aren't necessarily technology perfectionists, what steps should we take? Kind of, what's a 1, 2, 3 in your mind? If I'm a new patient, I go to this website, pulmonaryfibrosis.org. It's all this colors and brightness and buttons. And what should I really do at that point in time?
Well, I think when you get to the website, we have tracks and information for newly diagnosed patients. But if you're not comfortable with technology, you can also call our 800 number, which is 844-PFF-TALK. And as you referenced, talk to a live person who can really provide a lot of information, including our new patient packet. Also answer questions about access to local healthcare providers, and I think very importantly, get people in touch with local support groups, because we realize that that's incredibly important early on.
I know there's over 100 support groups around the country that are sponsored by the PFF. I have one here in Dallas, as an example, the PF Warriors, and we have our meetings monthly. We having one this Saturday, as a matter of fact. I'll be talking about this discussion with you during that meeting, and sharing some ideas and information. But I think the best introduction I had to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation after that initial, I'm going to call it that initial bubble, getting information, getting understanding, kind of learning about the role you play in not just advocacy, but also one of the important roles, what every patient wants first and foremost is a cure. Sure. Beyond all else, we want a cure. Fix us, help us get better. And the second thing we want to do is, how do we live with this disease? Mm-hmm. What do we need to do? How about things like oxygen? How about drugs? How about lifestyle? How about pulmonary rehabilitation? All of those issues. Now, those are addressed in some way, form, or fashion on the website. And also, can you talk a little bit, Bill, about the webinars that are done on a regular basis, the educational efforts that the PFF does?
Sure. So we have webinars periodically throughout the year. They tend to be topic specific, but there are a lot of the topics that you've just outlined that we know are important to patients from hearing from patients on a regular basis. It's a great opportunity for us often to show off our medical team, which is world class at PFF. We're very, very proud to have the medical team that we have. And so, it's an opportunity for newly diagnosed patients and families to hear from experts on a range of topics that we know are of importance to people, because we're constantly surveying the community and really trying to make sure we're on top of what the most important subjects are that people want to hear about.
One of the other things that again, going back to what most patients, including me and everyone else, want, we want the silver bullet. Give us the cure. Help fix this thing. Make it go away. And you do that, but you do it in a different way, because I don't think any organization has enough money to find the cure. And many drug companies try it. It's billions of dollars invested, billions. Right. But you do something I was exposed to in Nashville at the summit. In the summit, for those that didn't have the opportunity to go, I can give you my first impression. I walked in this beautiful hotel and went up these escalators, and there's this long hallway, a buzz with people, all people walking around, and all kinds of exhibits and all kinds of people talking about PF. And it's all our brothers and sisters. It's all patients and caregivers and families and doctors and professionals. And you hear all this buzz and you see what's happening. And the first realization I had when I saw that summit, I'm not alone.
Right.
I'm part of a dynamic family. And my hat's off to the PFF for putting that together. It had to be, I think, the best event I've ever attended. And I probably echo the thought of most people.
It's wonderful to hear, Bill, and we're very proud of that event. Obviously, it was my first one. I was completely bowled over. We had 900 people attend from 45 states, 12 countries, and it was this wonderful mix of patients, caregivers, a variety of healthcare providers, scientists, all coming together, to focus on how do we shrink the timelines on finding cures and treatments, and how do we improve the quality of care for patients? How do we close that gap on making diagnoses faster than has been the case up until now? It was a great meeting, and I love hearing your feedback on it, because we're very proud of it and look forward to carrying that on into the future.
One of the things that happened at that meeting that I haven't seen it publicized where it's really common knowledge. I'd like you to talk about it a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was part of a meeting on genomics, on the gene and the genome. And it was, to me, the indication of what is the PFF all about when it comes to helping find a cure. Sure. Would you talk about that? Because I'll just describe it very briefly, and I'd like you to talk about it. I was in a room with probably 15, 16, 17 of the world's leading scientists, the people in gene research, doctors, pharmaceutical executives, leaders in research. And they were speaking in 16 syllables I had a hard time following, but it was really incredible. You put that together. The PFF put that together and made that happen. And it's got huge potential payback for us as patients. Would you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, there was a lot of brain power in that room, wasn't there, Bill? Yeah, let me just step back for a second and say, in terms of our general approach to research, I think the really good news in this community is there is already a lot of commercial interest. And what you said before is absolutely correct. There is no way that we can develop treatments ourselves, the foundation, and push them across the goal line and get them to patients. It's billions of dollars. You're absolutely right. So our role is really to facilitate research efforts, make it as easy as possible for commercial entities to get treatments to the market. So what does that mean? That means being able to find patients quickly. We've got our care center network that they can plug into as well. Our vision for the longer term is basically developing a therapeutics network within that care center network, where a company with a compound can come and immediately plug into a whole host of centers. We hope to be able to make that process very efficient and very cost effective for the companies, so that, again, it's all about speed. It's all about getting these treatments to patients as quickly as possible. So that's really the vision. And the meeting you're referring to was on genomics. We were partnering in that meeting with Three Lakes Partners, based here in Chicago, that's, as you know, also very, very focused on finding treatments for patients as quickly as possible. And really what that was all about is really marshaling the resources and all the latest technology to really characterize all the patients that are entering into the patient registry and genotype them, so that we know more about them. We learn more about the natural history of the disease. We're even going to be able, I think, learn about different treatment patterns in different parts of the country by collecting that kind of information. And that is also part of a broader effort around genomics that we're also collaborating with the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute on at the NIH. And of course, as you know, they've got a $32 billion wallet, so they're also a very key player. And you may have recalled that Dr. James Kiley, who's head of the lung division at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, was at the summit, which was a very big deal in my view. So it's really, that was a great example. I'm glad you cited it, of PFF really partnering with a number of different entities to, again, shrink timelines on treatments and cures.
You mentioned something I'd like you to expound on a little bit, and that's the registry. I don't think most of us collectively as patients know what that means and what it is. And it's very exciting. And I'd like you to just kind of comment about where it's been and, more importantly, where it's going.
Sure. So the registry is basically a database of patients. The infrastructure for getting patients into the registry is our care center network. So we have 40 centers across the country, and they're really primarily responsible for identifying those patients and getting them into the registry. Once in the registry, a lot of information is collected, demographic data, medical records, history of treatment, all kinds of information. I mean, literally dozens of data points. And the idea there is to provide this treasure trove of information, obviously all very anonymous. We take privacy extremely seriously, so it's all anonymous data. And that information will be available to researchers, again, anonymously, to do research studies, again, to learn more about the natural history of the disease, and also treatment patterns, across the United States. We know, for example, from the cystic fibrosis experience that the creation of a patient registry is a critical piece of the research picture in terms of, again, really speeding treatments toward treatments and cures. And I'm also pleased to say that we already have 5 research proposals ongoing by using the registry data, and I think that's just going to grow exponentially. And we're continuing to grow the registry. We're hoping to be at 2,000 patients by this summer, and I think we're actually going to beat that deadline. So recruitment is going very, very well.
That's really exciting. The other thing that excited me, and it hasn't really been publicized or talked about, and it's kind of a 180-degree turn for the PFF, because to this point in time, there hasn't been a whole lot of lobbying by the foundation with our government, with the NIH for funding, with the Congress as far as legislation on a lot of issues, including oxygen and more. And that's now taking place under your leadership. I wonder if you might just touch on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Very excited about this. And I should mention my first job out of college way back when was working for a member of Congress here in Illinois. So this is my background. I also spent about 15, 20 years lobbying on medical research issues on behalf of patient organizations. So it's my background. So what we were able to announce at the summit was basically the merging of activities by the PFF and the Pulmonary Fibrosis Advocates, which has been led by Paul Fogelberg and Brian Baird for the last 6 years. They have done tremendous work in Washington, lobbying on issues that affect PF patients. Obviously, a lot is going on in Washington that impacts people with PF, whether it's the NIH budget, which I mentioned before is $32 billion, the largest funder of medical research in the world. Oxygen, you mentioned oxygen, access to oxygen. How is the Medicare program, treating access to oxygen? How is all that going? It's not going well. We know that. And so we're mounting an effort, again, in partnership with Paul and Brian and perhaps the American Lung Association and many other organizations. I met recently with the Pulmonary Hypertension Association as well to really lobby Washington on ensuring better access to oxygen. We know from hearing from a lot of patients, and there's a lot of survey data on this, that access to oxygen is a real serious problem. Patients with PF, patients with PH as well. I talked about this recently with the PHA, have higher flow needs, and the current system at Medicare is really not acknowledging that, and so we've got a lot of work to do on that. But I couldn't be more thrilled about the partnership with PFA, and we're really starting to transition, their efforts into the PFFs. They've been able to, it's very impressive, over the last 6 years, put together a very impressive pro bono, I want to emphasize that we're not spending a lot of money on this, but pro bono lobbying operation with several firms in Washington, D.C., and couldn't be more excited about the potential for what we can do in Washington to help PF patients.
It's going to be a huge home run, I think, for all of us, all of us.
We're going to need everybody. We're going to need everybody's involvement on that. I really want to emphasize.
Yes.
We're going to need to develop the army, if you will, to really, because you've got to make noise in Washington, and we're going to need everybody across the country who cares about these issues really engaging with their legislators.
I think, as Paul pointed out so well, it has to be the right kind of noise, the right voice saying the right things. And I know that you're going to be establishing programs to do exactly that. The other thing that also really energized me was seeing this new evolving synergy that's taking place between the American Lung Association and the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. And that is kind of a new game in town. It's been there in a quiet mode, but let's make it easy. It's becoming a lot louder and more vocal and more visible. I find it really very exciting because that says collaboration, as you're doing with the PHA and others, COPD Foundation, I would hope, and others. We're all kind of singing from the same sheet, and that becomes an important song.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed the opportunity to meet and get to know Harold Wimmer, who's the CEO at the American Lung Association. We're actually planning a meeting right now to sit down as two organizations and figure out how we can collaborate better, make sure we're not duplicating efforts. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to work with them, with the COPD Foundation, with the PHA on the oxygen issue. We've already had discussions with the American Lung Association on that issue as well. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't need to tell you, Bill, this is a big problem with many complicated issues, I should say, and we need everybody working together to solve them.
Absolutely. The other thing, Leanne Starch asked a question, which is a good question. And I know you were a judge on the IPF Catalyst Challenge, which is being announced in 2 weeks in Chicago. I understand you're not going to be, unfortunately or fortunately, based on your perspective there, you're going to be playing tennis someplace in Australia and more, I'm sure, but you're not going to be there. But talk a little bit about the Catalyst from your viewpoint, because you were a judge. You judged some of the entries and saw some. And you've been from the very ground zero, you've been involved in that in some aspect. What is your impression of the Catalyst and its impact on patients?
Well, I think prizes are an interesting approach to tackling, medical research problems. I think it's worked in a number of contexts, and I think Three Lakes Partners has really done a good job of creating this prize. And I saw some very, interesting, very, very innovative proposals that, would be, I think at the end of the day, very helpful to PF patients. And I'm really looking forward to seeing who the finalists are and who ends up getting, the 3 awards. But I think it really galvanized the community in a lot of ways and generated ideas and proposals, even from people who weren't necessarily in the PF space or hadn't been for very long, perhaps. And through that kind of an exercise, you can get some very innovative, fresh thinking.
Yeah, I'm just energized by some of the things that I saw and some of the entries that came along. It started out with 300 people, organizations, companies came forward. Of that, the qualification process to go to the next step was very difficult and stringent. And 80 of them qualified. Of the 80, they have 9 finalists, and they'll have 3 winners in 2 weeks. And I can say from my own perspective that I'm excited. I will be there applauding those 3 winners along with everybody else. It's for us. It's for us.
Yeah, that's great. It is.
The last, maybe one of the most important questions, and I hope people watching this kind of think about this for a moment. We collectively, as a community, patients, families, caregivers, medical community, we all want to help. How do we do it? How do we best work with the PFF? What steps should we take to become engaged? What do we have to do to be involved?
Well, I think, certainly come to our website and that contains a lot of information about all the various ways in which people can get involved. We want people to get involved in things that they're particularly, perhaps passionate about, whether it's our government relations efforts and working on some of the problems in Washington. We certainly want people signing up for the support groups to the extent that they need those, and become perhaps leaders of support groups as you've done. I mean, you have a model support group there in Texas. So there really are a variety of ways laid out, on the website that people can really get engaged. And we really need everybody engaged in this who has an inclination to become engaged. This I don't need to tell you, this is a big, challenging problem, and outcomes for patients currently are totally unacceptable. And we've got a lot of work to do, and we all need to band together to do it. I really, my view on this and my philosophy is the PFF is the patient community's organization. This is your organization, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your best ideas. We want to know what's happening in terms of people's journeys with the disease. We want to know we're never going to be perfect as an organization. We do want to hear how we can do things better and obviously faster. We know fast is a big priority for patients and caregivers. So we welcome involvement. We need your involvement. Fundraising is going to be another key goal for us going forward. You can have all the best laid plans in the world, but if we don't have the resources to execute them, they're just ideas and nothing happens. So that's another key priority for us going forward is really expanding and diversifying our fundraising base.
I agree. Cindy, let me put this on screen so you can see it. Cindy asked a question of you, Bill, and that's addressing a little bit about the fundraising opportunities that have happened. For example, the Broadway Dulce event and those types of things that are part of the community. And in fundraising, I think sometimes we as patients, we don't give it the attention that perhaps we should. And it's not just the grease that makes the wheel turn. It's really the resource that's needed to achieve the goals.
Absolutely. There's no question. As I say, we can't achieve any of what's in our wonderful strategic plan without the resources. And look, I've been in this for a long time. I understand that fundraising can be intimidating to people, but we really offer a variety of ways for people to raise money. We have a walk program now. We had a wonderful initial PFF walk this past fall, raised almost $250,000, which was incredible. We had participation from multiple states. We had 100 walk teams, which just blew my mind. I know a little something about walks, and that was just incredible. And those are really collections of small donations. That's people going to their family members, their neighbors, whatever networks they may have, and raising small amounts of money. It can be $25 at a time and that kind of thing. So, I think we offer a variety of ways to raise money. It doesn't, it's not always the expensive dinners and that kind of thing. In terms of Cindy's question, we had a year-end appeal this year that did very, very well. I'm pleased to report. At the centerpiece of that campaign was a very generous matching gift from the Hales family in New York. And we, I'm pleased to say, raised over $300,000 in our year-end appeal, which was a very big increase over previous years and certainly over what we expected. Similarly, the walk last fall, I think, raised roughly twice what we thought it was going to raise. So I think there's good momentum. We also want to reach out to families that have capacity who really want to make a difference in this disease. And so we're working on a number of fronts in terms of fundraising. In terms of Broadway Belts, I haven't attended yet myself, but it's going to be on March 12th in New York. And based on what I've seen and heard about previous events, it's a wonderfully entertaining event with a lot of Broadway talent there, and all the proceeds go to PFF and PF research.
Julie Halston
leads that up.
A true angel when it comes to all of that. She really has a family.
He really is so charismatic.
Bill, if you listen real close, you're going to hear a lot of applause out there because I think without exception, anybody that's listening to this understands you're a man of heart and integrity. And I'm thrilled to see you leading this parade. And it is a parade of patients and families. And we have a job to do. And I'm so happy you're leading the charge to do that job. And I think I speak for most of the patients in our community at large. We're here to help you as well as you're helping us. So it's kind of a partnership.
Well, thanks, Bill. We want the help. We need the help. And I certainly want to thank you for this opportunity, and also to thank you and recognize you for all you do as a leader and an advocate in this community. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So, congratulations on that. I mean, your social media following, your support group, it's really amazing. And we appreciate it.
Right. Well, thank you. And if you're listening to this, please, when you get off this call, get to that website and look how you can help. And if you need information, it's there, and there's so much depth and richness to it. And Bill, thank you for your time. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate it. And I think everyone in our community appreciates it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Take care.